Now I'm really happy and honored to be able to introduce to you our next speaker. She loves open source as a medium for connecting developers from all around the world and believes that a community is very important. Therefore, she advocates building open source software and developer communities. She started a local Vue meetup chapter of Front-End Foxes for those who identify as women. She starts small to ignite local and global open source engagement and is passionate about making the web accessible to everyone. Where she's not coding, she's cooking delicious meals, and people know her as the mistress of Nigerian jollof. I hope I said it correctly. So ask her about jollof, what it is, and maybe if you're friends, you had a chance to taste it already. Or she's exploring the world of photography. Very passionate, very energetic, very eager and experienced woman who started so many things in Nigeria as the first lady over there, but travels a lot and now lives in Amsterdam, if I'm not wrong. So please welcome, ladies and gentlemen, front-end developer and consultant at Passionate People and a tech content creator. Her name is Gift Egwuenu. She has some of the best social media profiles you can find, likes to communicate, writes a lot, has her own YouTube channel. So if you're interested in what she does, you can always Google her and contact her directly. Am I right, Gift?
Yeah, you're right.
Is everything ready? The floor is yours. Enjoy it and good luck.
Okay, hi everyone. Very excited to be here. Like she said, I'm very passionate about sharing, and I'm glad that I'm here to do that. Yeah, I need to figure out why my slide's not showing up there. All my setup is messed up. Okay, yeah. Hi everyone, my name is Gift Egwuenu, and I'm very excited, like I said, to be speaking about CSS. And how many of us here are big fans of CSS? Oh, I'm so happy to see that. I know that there is like some people that are like, I love CSS, but I don't like writing it. And I totally understand that, but I hope this talk would give you another perspective, and the major goal that I have for this talk is to share with you some of the new things or new CSS features that shipped in the last year. And I feel like a lot of people might have missed it, so this talk is going to be sharing some of those with some demos. So my name is Gift Egwuenu. I work as a front-end developer consultant at Passionate People. I also really love creating content, and I do that through my YouTube channel, and I write blog posts on my personal blog as well. If you love to check that out, you can find me on my socials. So this talk is going to be a timeline. I'll try to cover 3 different parts of the entire talk. So I'm going to go over where CSS was in the past decade, where we are right now with modern CSS, and what the future would look like. I am very excited about the future, but I'll just give you a sneak peek of what you should expect to see coming to CSS. So of course, I'm going to start with the history. I don't know how many of you all here have been writing CSS for a very long time, like say 10 years. If that's your case, can I see your hands? That's good then. Then you understand that if you compare what we currently have, like how websites are being built or how CSS works now, it's totally different from what it used to be, right? There are a lot of different things that are shipped, and the way you write CSS right now is totally different. For example, do you remember doing like layouts with floats and clear? Those were things you had to do back in the day. Or having to style your layout with tables, like I'm very sorry for people that still have to do that today with HTML emails, but that's just very terrible. And then you have to literally support several versions of browsers like IE 7 or whatever, and you have to literally make sure that CSS that you write works in some specific browsers. And coming from that phase, I have like these images that I found on the web of some very popular websites and what they looked like in the past. And you can totally see that websites don't look like this anymore, right? Of course, if you visit a website and you find it looking like this, you'll probably be wondering what's going on if you're in the right place. Yeah? And going from that to where we are now, so the present. So the present, where we are now with CSS is totally different, because with CSS, with modern CSS now, you could do things like styling your layout with Flexbox and CSS Grid, which makes it way more intuitive than when you would use things like float and clear or positioning just to make sure the footer is, at the bottom of the screen. And apart from Flexbox and CSS Grid, there are other features that are also shipped, and my goal for this talk is to share at least 5 of them and also show you how they work with some use cases. So going over the modern CSS features that I want to share, I guess maybe some of you might already know this. Some of them, it might be your first time seeing them, so let's get right into it. So the first one is Scroll Snap. This is a feature that's shipped a couple of years ago, but personally, I don't think a lot of people might have noticed or used it in production. And my goal is to show you what it can do. And Scroll Snap is a CSS feature that allows you to add scroll positions to a container. So for example, if you have like an image gallery, right, and you want to scroll through it, typically it's not a very good experience when you're trying to do that from like, for example, I use a Mac, so I have to do this sometimes if I have long nails, and it's typically very hard to do that sometimes. On mobile is better because you just use your thumb to scroll. But with this feature, it allows you to set some snap position in a container, and what this does is it enforces the and your property called scroll type aligned to the children of the parent container. And this could also be, if you wanted to snap to the start, the center, or the end, you could set any of those options. So I have this, I'll be switching screens a lot between this and my demo, so I will just do that. So I have this quick demo here. Oh my God. So I have this demo on how Scroll Snaps works. So the first, this is like my typical replication of an image gallery. So you could scroll through it. Typically, the first one I have here doesn't have any Scroll Snap properties applied. So this is how you typically just add a gallery to your code with HTML and CSS, right? And here's the experience. So I'm trying to slide through it, and probably, let's imagine these were images and I want to stop to see them. This is how the experience would go, right? Like, even if you try to scroll slower, it still like goes away from the fixed container. And now on the second box that I have here, I have the scroll snap type applied to the container. So here, this is right here. This is the container of this box, and I applied the scroll snap type of X and mandatory, meaning that it should snap to the position where I assigned it. So it's X-axis means it has to go sideways. And you also have the opportunity to add scroll padding. So what scroll padding does is, this scroll padding I have here is quite small, but I could increase it so you see it. So if you don't want the snap position to be at the edge of the container like it was before, you could add something like scroll padding to the container, and can do the same for the children of the parent container by adding a scroll margin to it. Now the difference, as you can see, I already tried the first one, but if I try scrolling through the second box, you'd see it has a snap effect. So, and the reason why it's not at the edge of the container is because I added the scroll padding, right? This is way more better experience than the first one that I showed you. So if your goal is to try to build something like this and you don't know that this CSS property exists, and typically people would use external libraries for stuff like this, but you can now do it natively with CSS. And there are other options you could add. The same applies to if you want to scroll over a page. So you change the scroll snap type. Instead of the x-axis, it becomes the y-axis. And then the next, if you're wondering, can I actually use this on the browser? You can, because currently the scroll snap is supported on all major browsers except, as you can see there, IE. But I feel like a lot of people here use Edge, Firefox, or Chrome. And yeah, just so you know, it's widely supported. The next property here is aspect ratio. And aspect ratio is another CSS property that you can start using today. The major thing that it helps you do is to set an aspect ratio. So if you, for example, have an image on a page or a video, for example, a YouTube video, and you generically set a width and a height to it, you could do that, that's fine, but it's a standard to see that YouTube videos have like a 16:9 ratio, and you would typically do that initially using something called a padding top arc when this aspect ratio property did not exist. And how that works is you have to literally calculate to get a 16:9 ratio. You have to calculate the 16 is the width and 9 is the height. So you do 9 divided by 16 times 100% to get the specific padding top, to get that exact 16:9 aspect ratio that you needed to do, that you needed to have. Now, you don't need to do any of that to get a specific aspect ratio. So if you think that you want to set an image to like a ratio of 4:3, instead of doing the hack of dividing and then getting the specific percentage for the padding top, you could just add the aspect ratio directly to your styles and set the exact ratio that you want. I have a demo also showing you the difference between both of them. So the first demo here is using the padding top hack that I mentioned. And here I have a container and I want to set it to a 16:9 ratio, right? The typical solution for this that people used a lot before the aspect ratio shipped to browsers was to do what I explained, having to do the calculation to get the exact same size that you want. And this works because this is the 16:9 ratio. And comparing this to the new solution that I'm introducing you to, right? And it's missing. Yeah, this is it. So this is another demo showing you how to use the aspect ratio. I have this, a use case could be that you have like a grid or a couple of images on a page that you want to be a specific aspect ratio, what I did here is I purposely selected images that have different width and different height. And here I'll just set first of all, I have to set a height and the object fit cover so they all have at least the same dimensions. And I want them all to have an aspect ratio of 4:3. It could also be an aspect ratio of 4:1, depending on what you want for your image. And what this does is it aligns all the images you have to that specific aspect ratio. If I want it to be different, I can actually change it to another one. But the takeaway here is that the initial solution that I showed you, which is very common, you don't need to do that anymore because you could just use the property directly and then you achieve the results that you want. The next, again, on browser support. This is currently supported in Chrome, Edge, and Firefox. And again, IE is still lacking behind, but if you need to use it in major browsers, this is something you could consider to use instead of the previous hack that I shared. The next tip or new style that I would like to share is the new CSS PseudoClass Selectors. A couple of weeks ago, I saw an article someone wrote about how they now use this, and I was like, I didn't know about this, and I was preparing this talk. I didn't know about this, and I was like, okay, I think this is going to be a perfect candidate because I didn't know it, so I guess a lot of people here also are in the same phase as I was. So I'm happy to share with you what these are. So the CSS ESelector is a pseudo-class function that you can use to, I think a lot of people would relate to what I want to, or this example that I have here, but you use it to group selectors that are alike. Typically what you would do in this case, if you needed, without the ESelector, if you needed to select multiple classes that are children of a specific parent, you would have to do what I have there. You had to select each of them, like selecting each of them, and if it was more classes than I have here, then your CSS file is already becoming ugly, and that's not very nice. But that was where we were at some point. But now with the ESelector, you could actually group selectors or classes regardless of, it could be selectors, classes, or IDs, and apply the styles that you want to apply to them, as long as you have them grouped inside of the, right? The where selector does the exact same function. The only difference is that the specificity of the where function is 0. So basically, if you have if you're trying to select some elements on your page and you have a where pseudo class before the is will always take precedence because the where doesn't have any specificity. So just in case you are trying to use that, you should have that in mind. But they do exactly the same function. And then in not selector, this is another pseudo class that's also new. And what it does, it's basically a negation pseudo class. So if you're trying not to pick a specific thing, you could use it. So if you're trying to style a page where you have a lot of headings and you want one specific heading, you don't want to style that heading, that's a use case that you could use the not selector for. Quick demo again. I have this very simple blog page, and I want to try to use the is, the where, and the not selector on it rather. So, like the example you saw there, what I did here is I have this entire div, this entire section. That's and on that section, I have like an article tag, I have a p tag, and what I did here was I selected the section, which is the container of this div, and then I said if there is an article or a paragraph that you should apply, it should apply a font size of 30 pixels and a background of red. Typically, if you were going to do this before, you have like multiple selectors selected instead of using the is. The same applies to the other example that I have here, using where. So I'm saying where there's an H2, you should give it a background of white. And this just gives you an idea that you could do more with this. You could actually select multiple selectors. You could put it, the way I'm doing it right now, I'm selecting a couple of children inside a container. You could have multiple selectors. Like, the possibility with this is endless. And finally, just showing you how you could use the not selector. Here I'm also selecting all the articles inside of the container, and I'm applying a color of dark gray, I would say, to it. And yeah, so that's how you typically use those pseudo-class selectors in your CSS. The next one on my list is CSS Map Functions, and this is also very interesting because there are several use cases that you could use this for. I already see it being used like when you want to set a specific font size on a page and make sure that they are responsive. You could use either clamp for that, but I'll explain what these are. So first, the minimum function or the min function in CSS. What it does is, you think it helps you select the minimum function, but at first that was actually confusing for me, because what this function does is it takes in comma separated values inside of it, and the major goal is to set the maximum value. So it's basically the opposite of what the name is. The minimum function selects the maximum value. The max function does the exact opposite. The maximum function has, of course, comma separated values in it, but it selects the minimum value. And the clamp function does more than that. The clamp function is basically a function that clamps the value. So you have three parameters inside of a clamp function. You have the minimum value, the preferred value you want to set if you're using it in a width or you're using it in a font size, the preferred value that you want, and then the maximum value. To make sense of all of this, I put together a short demo just to show you how they work. So testing out the minimum value first, I have this very simple, again, demo, and I have the width of this box here that you see set to a minimum value of 50% and 400 pixels. What does this do? So when you set a minimum value, you're saying that when the view width of this page is 50% of when it's 50% of the view width, it should increase the size, so setting the maximum value. But if it's less than that, it should reduce it. So I would try to show you that. So 50% of 400 pixels is 800. 50 pixels of 400 is 800, yeah. No, 800 pixels. If the view width is 800 pixels, to get the exact width that I have here, it's 400. So I'll just check that. So if I make the container width 800, you see that once the maximum width hits 800, then it reduces the value. If it's above that, then it sticks to the exact value that was set. So maximum value in this case, let's try that, would do the exact opposite of what I just showed you. So I'm setting here the maximum value 50% and 600 pixels. Now, if the viewport width, so the entire container width, is greater than 600 pixels, then it expands. If it's not, then it remains the same. So this is at 600 pixels. If I move the container width to 1,200, which is 50% here, 1,200, and then it increases. So the minimum value sets the maximum value when you hit a specific point in the viewport, while the maximum value does the opposite of that. And the last one is actually interesting, the clamp function. This takes in 3 parameters, like I mentioned, the minimum, the preferred value, and the maximum value. Now I'll just make this a round number. I have this width that is 600 pixels, right? And I also have the minimum value set to 400. So basically what this does is it would not expand over 800 pixels, and it would also not reduce over 400 pixels, but it will set the height to the middle number, so the initial value or the preferred value. I will try to show you how that works now. So this is the box width, it's 600 pixels, and the container width is 1,200. So if I increase the container width over and let it hit at least 1,400, then it stops expanding. 1,600 rather. Just try making it bigger. So the idea with the clamp function is you have an initial value in the middle, and you have a minimum value and you have a maximum value. It doesn't expand over the minimum value or the maximum value, and as long as you extend the container width, it goes over, it sets the specific width to the initial value rather. Okay. In terms of support for these functions, it's widely supported in major browsers from Edge to Firefox to Chrome and Safari, except IE, of course. And if you're thinking about learning more about this, you can, or trying to use it, you could explore and see where you could use this. For example, a use case for this could be when you want to set the width of a specific element like I just showed you, or if you're trying to set a responsive typography for a specific font size on a page, you could use any of these values. And the last one I would like to share is called container queries. And this has been something a lot of people on the web has been asking for. I mean, we've had media queries for a very long time. It does pretty much well with screen sizes. So if you need to set your screen size to a specific viewport, say on mobile or on desktop, that works. But container queries totally changes the game, because with container queries, you could set specific width or height for a containing element. So now you don't need to make your page fit to a specific viewport like a mobile or a laptop device, but now it fits in a container element. And how this works is, of course, you need to use the @container property. I'll show you a demo of how that works before coming back to this. Because this is still very fresh, it's really still in a working draft as at now. It's not currently supported in all browsers, but if you would like to give it a try to just see what you could do with it, you could always use it on Chrome Canary, and you have to turn on the container queries experimental feature to test it out. So here I have this card element, and typically how I would make this responsive before container queries came would be I have like a media query, and I have to check is it a laptop screen, what specific minimum width do I want to assign to it, or is it a mobile phone, and so on. But with container queries, you don't need to think about that because you could style your specific elements to fit on a container. And use cases for this could be if you have, for example, a page that has profile pictures of people, right? And you have on that page, you also have an aside where you want that specific aside not to change, but you want the other part of the container to change. Then with container queries, that's possible. Here I have this demo here where I have this card, and I'm using the container queries. In order to use this, you need to always set a contain property in the parent of the container you want to style. And to test this out, what I did here was I have a container query for this card at a minimum width of 600 pixels. It should do a specific thing. I also set the same for at a minimum width of 100 pixels. It should change the style. And with that, I added a contain property to the parent just to make sure that it works. So if I resize this card, now take note, I'm not resizing the screen or the viewport, I'm only resizing the container. This is the default styling, and if I extend it over the first container query that I set, which was 600 pixels, then it changes the style, and if I do the same, this is the default, and then I extend it over, and then it is the layout, and finally I extend it to an extra minimum width of 1,000 pixels, and it also changes the layout for what I set. So this is only scratching the surface of what's possible with container queries, but there's so much more you could do, and there are so many use cases that you could actually use this CSS feature for. To go over the next part of this talk, which is, of course, what's coming in CSS, or what should you expect to see in the future. I think you should expect to see more. I already showed you like a sneak peek of container queries, which I feel like is part of the new features that is coming to the web, and it's currently not supported in browsers yet, but I feel like we should expect to see support in the next year or so. Apart from that, there are also several CSS specs that are currently being considered that I feel like a lot of you might be interested in. One of them that I really liked is CSS Nesting module. And what this does is it basically helps you nest properties. So this is something you typically use SAS for, but you wouldn't need that again when you have this property supported in major browsers. So for me personally, I'm looking forward to seeing it come to the browser. Apart from that, there are several different specifications that are being considered, and I would recommend that you all check out the CSS working group current work draft, where they have like all the features that are being considered, the ones that are being worked on, the ones that are completed. And for me specifically, I really liked the fact that they had all this information public. So in case you're a CSS fan like I am, you can always keep track of that. So my goal for this talk was to just give you a sneak peek of what you could do now with modern browsers, and I hope that by the end, or I'm already done, I hope that you would go back home and test out some of these things and start using them in your work. And yeah, thank you.